My name is Nicollette Roy, student ID 2023302, and this is my assignment 1 for strategy and the global competitive environment. Today we are looking at solar energy in the agriculture industry. Firstly, let's look at the role of agriculture in the world economy. Agriculture makes up 4% of the world's gross domestic product. However, in developing countries, it accounts for 20 to 60% of GDP and can employ up to 70% of their population. This according to the World Bank 2020. In Trinidad and Tobago, it makes up 0.4% of GDP as of 2017. The sector relies heavily on the use of fossil fuels, which negatively impacts the environment and contributes to climate change. In 2018, it produced 9.3 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, and in 2019, the estimates indicate that the industry was responsible for 22.5% of all greenhouse gas emissions. A snapshot of the agriculture industry. The segment that we are focusing on is crop farming, which includes cocoa, rice, citrus, coffee, fruits, and vegetables. The market size and projections. According to the United Nations, the industry in 2019 employed 884 million people, around 27% of the global workforce. Food demands is expected to increase to meet the predicted population growth of 2 billion people. Anticipated growth rate of total world consumption of all agricultural products is 1.1% per year, implying that worldwide production in 2050 should be 60% greater than 2007. Key competitors are individual farmers, commercial farms, and the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. The market share is in favor of the Ministry of Agriculture as they provide incentives and programs for farmers registered with the government. A micro-analysis of the industry indicates that rivalry is high. Farmers try to gain competitive advantage with the cost of produce, but too many competitors make competition fierce. Bargaining power of buyers is relatively low. Buyers have little influence on the cost of produce. The bargaining power of suppliers, on the other hand, is moderate. Private seed suppliers can only influence the cost to an extent, since there are government-sponsored seed programs available. The threat of new entrants is high. It's relatively easy to secure agricultural land and to start crop farming given the tax incentives available to the sector. The threat of substitute products is also high. Trinidad and Tobago imports 85% of its food supply. Looking at the macro analysis and key emerging trends, we see that growth of economies has a moderate uncertainty level as well as impact level. We also see that the cost of fossil fuels has a high impact but low uncertainty. This is because the cost of fuel is increasing due to the limitations in the availability of non-renewable resources. In the field of technology, the level of uncertainty is on the lower side, since advancements in solar technologies have driven the cost down, which has a high impact on the industry. Solar technology is now being used in greenhouses for heating and cooling, farm field irrigation, and solar drying processes in agriculture. Environmentally, the level of uncertainty due to climate change is low, since the evidence is extensive. The reality is agriculture produces high greenhouse gas emissions, which increases the world temperature, leading to changes in the climate. The impact is climbing towards high due to political factors such as the Paris Agreements. Socioculturally, population growth will have a high impact on the industry. If the population increases beyond estimates, food production will need to meet larger demands, which will mean rapid growth of the agriculture industry, which is highly uncertain. Government regulation towards sustainability is highly uncertain. This also ranks high as impact on the industry can be negative or positive. Legal frameworks have the power and the potential to transform populations into environmentally conscious ones. From our previous analysis, we have determined that of the key emerging trends, population growth and government environment laws have the highest impact on the industry and are both highly uncertain. Using these two dimensions, we derived our scenario grid. Scenario 1, an exploited world. Here, the population growth rapidly exceeds the UN's estimate and there is increased pressure on the agriculture sector to meet higher food demands. The sector continues to operate without any real changes as there are little government environment regulations and little incentives for the use of renewable energies. The population is not environmentally conscious. Scenario 2, a wonderful world. Here, the population growth also rapidly exceeds the UN's estimate, and there are increased pressure on the agriculture sector to meet higher food demands. However, strict environment legislation is implemented through rigorous sustainability policies and tax incentives. The agriculture sector adopts solar energy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while increasing the output to meet larger food demands. Strict laws lead to an environmentally conscious population. Scenario 3, a balanced world. Here, the population growth is within the UN's estimate and there is growth in the agriculture sector as government promotes food security. Strict environment legislation is implemented by the government through rigorous sustainability policies and tax incentives. The agriculture sector adopts solar energy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while increasing the output to reach food security levels. Strict laws lead to an environmentally conscious population. Scenario 4, a fractured world. Here, the population growth is within the UN's estimate, but the agriculture sector is stagnant with no growth. The sector continues to operate without any real changes as little government environment regulations and there are little incentives for the use of renewable energy. The population is not environmentally conscious. Scenario planning for the next 25 years. What happens after each scenario and what is unknown about the scenarios? Scenario 1, an exploited world. Here the population growth is exceedingly high and there are lax government environmental laws. What happens after this scenario is that food disparity is high, there's increased farming to meet the demands and greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise. What is unknown about this scenario is if leaders are relaxed among global pressures towards adopting sustainability. Scenario 2, a wonderful world. Here, the population growth is exceedingly high, but there are stringent government environment laws. What happens after this scenario is that law transform the agriculture and other industries towards sustainability. Increased growth of the agriculture sector so that food resources meet the increased demands. What is unknown about this scenario is if the increased population will reflect an increase in economic growth and if solar technology is readily available in agriculture sectors across the globe. Scenario 3, a balanced world. Here, the population growth is within the UN's estimate and there are stringent government environment laws. What happens after this scenario is that government laws ensure sustainability is the new status quo for industries and the population. Growth in the agriculture sector is achieved to reach food security levels, and the sector emits no greenhouse gas emissions, completely relying on solar energy technology. What is unknown about this scenario is how quickly farmers can learn to use new technology. Scenario 4, a fractured world. Here, the population growth is within the UN's estimate and there are lax government environment laws. What happens after this scenario is that there is stagnant growth in the agriculture sector because there are no new laws implemented and the sector remains small. There is no change in the current status quo. What is unknown about this scenario is if governments are comfortable with the minimum sustainability regulations and policies that they currently have. The scenario selected is scenario 3, a balanced world. In this scenario, population growth is slow or within the UN's estimate. There are strict government environment policies and regulations, which leads to a sustainably conscious population. Renewable energy dominates all industries, and the use of solar technology is prevalent in agriculture. Here are the list of references used in this presentation. Thank you for viewing my presentation.